Thank you, Dan. It's wonderful to see each of you again after last night's celebrations. It was so inspiring to watch your videos and to listen to your different and really gracious acknowledgments of the award, but your work is just very inspiring. I'm going to begin with some brief introductions, and then we'll start the conversation. So first, we're going to be going from left to right for all of you who are watching. So first, I'd like to introduce John Hennessy. John Hennessy is a renowned computer scientist who helped to revolutionize the field of computer architecture. He served as the president of Stanford University and is now a professor there. We're recognizing John for his pioneering advances in computer architecture and leadership for both academic and corporate endeavors. Next, I'd like to introduce our three Waterman Award winners. Muyinatu A, Bell, Associate Professor at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Bell is being recognized for pioneering innovations in ultrasound and photoacoustic imaging. Her innovations improve medical image quality, reduce patient deaths during surgery, inspire new surgical designs, and provide more equitable health care. Next, Katrina G, Assistant Professor at the University of Colorado. Dr. Klaw is being recognized for outstanding contributions to pharmacogenomics and building a framework for inclusivity in genomic research that identifies values and addresses the ethical, cultural, and social implications of genomic research with Indigenous peoples and training a new generation of Indigenous and other historically underrepresented researchers. Rebecca Kramer-Bottiglio, Associate Professor, Yale University. Dr. Kramer-Bottiglio is being recognized for groundbreaking contributions to robotics, particularly in advancing the understanding of how to design and build machines that evolve on demand, impacting disciplines ranging from evolutionary biology to artificial intelligence to energy sciences, and her commitment to broadening the participation of students in STEM. And then we have our two Science and Society Award winners this year. First, we're honoring Eric Wooldridge and Sheri McGuffin for their high impact and accessible additive manufacturing educational training programs that have reached thousands of students in Kentucky. Eric is professor at Somerset Community College, and Sheri is Advanced Kentucky STEM coordinator with the Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation. And then we're celebrating the National Academy of Inventors, or NIAI. Representing NAI is Paul Sandberg, the organization's founder and director. The board recognizes NAI for its engaging and inclusive initiatives to strengthen and diversify the economy and inventors, the innovation economy and inventors. So now I'd like to ask each of you to take 3 minutes. I know that's hard, but you did it with your videos, right? To take about 3 minutes each to just give us a snapshot of how you got interested in the aspect of STEM that you yourself work in, and why you do what you do and what you're thinking of doing next. So you have 3 minutes, and then we'll have more of a conversation. So John, let's start with you.
Okay, I got started when computers were things that were far away and were accessed with teletypes and paper tape. As I tell my students when I take them to the Computer History Museum, that's the only place they can see the computers I learned to program on. But I arrived at Stanford in the dawn of the microprocessor age and transformed myself into a computer architect, asking a simple question: how should these single chip computers be designed differently than what we had designed before, which were large scale mainframes and room size computers? I think this now, as the microprocessor eventually dominated the entire industry, we are now faced with a different problem. We're in the middle of this deep learning wave, a technology that is moving faster than any technology before, faster than the internet, faster than the microprocessor, faster than the personal computer, faster than cell phones moved. And at the same time, and has tremendous computational requirements. The biggest problems we run, computational problems we run in the world now, are training a new large language model. The biggest problems, by probably more than an order of magnitude, bigger than the largest scientific problems we've run in the past. And at the same time, Moore's law is slowing down. This incredible driving rocket fuel we had driving the computer industry is slowing down. So the question that we face is, how are we going to find the computational capability to really free this deep learning technology to use it for really important problems in science, in healthcare, and in other fields? And that's a real difficult challenge. It's going to require the best young minds working on. And that's what I'm excited about.
Thank you so much. Vicey, let's turn to you next.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, especially when I think back to how I got my interest, or my earliest memory of interest in science, from public programming, watching the scientists on Sesame Street mix colorful liquid in test tubes. And, from there, my interest has been cultivated, grown, seeded, and nurtured through multiple supporters that I've had in my life, such as my teachers from all the way from elementary school to high school and college, who saw my potential and encouraged me to excel and succeed, as well as, my mother, who's no longer with us, but she made a point to very early on buy educational books and videos that I found very intriguing, and take me on trips to the public library, where I got to dig deeper into science and do really cool and advanced science fair projects. And then, of course, I have my brother who's here with me, who has also been guiding light and helped to nurture this interest, all the way from letting me do his math homework with him when I was in first grade and he was in third grade. I found the advanced math concepts to be so cool. And even, he's the one who informed me that this school called MIT existed when he learned of my newfound interest in engineering. And that interest in engineering came about because of a program that I was selected to participate in when I was in high school, for women sophomores who excelled in math and science. And the program was designed to teach us about engineering. And through that program, I identified engineering as the perfect mix of all of my scientific and technical and mathematical interests to date. And of course, MIT was very rigorous, as expected. And while I was at MIT, I learned about multiple different disciplines of engineering even more, built a very strong foundation, and added to that an interest in earlier cancer detection. So I had lost my mother while I was a student at MIT, a junior at MIT, and I wanted to address cancer problems with my engineering knowledge. And that's where I learned that there was a world of medical imaging, and I saw that as the window into earlier detection. And so I pursued graduate studies in medical imaging, and I've maintained that interest from graduate school to now, where now I'm a tenured professor at Johns Hopkins University, building medical imaging technologies for earlier cancer detection, for better diagnostics, and for surgical guidance. And some of the big challenges that I'm facing started with one of the major breakthroughs that I had as a student, as a graduate student, where I developed a medical imaging signal processing technique to address a problem that we call acoustic clutter in ultrasound images, which make the images difficult to read and difficult to interpret, particularly when you have overweight or obese patients. And prior to that, I thought medical imaging was one technique that would address everyone's problems the same way. And it was through that, research that I realized that's not the case, because current systems are designed around some average model that not all patients fit. And then this translates to work that I'm doing now as a professor, where I could take that same signal processing technique that I developed as a graduate student and apply it to improve the detection of suspicious breast masses and understand the content of suspicious breast masses, particularly in patients who have dense breasts. And most recently, I showed that when you combine ultrasound with light to make a photoacoustic image, this image suffers from the same acoustic clutter challenge, particularly in patients who have darker skin tones. And so that same technique that I developed as a graduate student can address the challenges with acoustic clutter in photoacoustic images as well. And going forward, I'm really looking forward to and excited about ensuring that we continue to develop equitable medical imaging technology for the benefit of patients nationwide and across the globe.
Well, as I said, it's very inspiring learning about all of your work. Thank you for that. And let's turn next to you, Katrina.
Great. So I was thinking about this last night. How did I get interested in science? I'm not really sure, but in my culture, we grow up sort of immersed and a part, science is a part of us. So when I talk about science, I'm talking about the knowledge that my ancestors passed on to my parents and they passed on to me. So it's not the Western scientific paradigm, but it is indigenous science. So indigenous people have domesticated animals, they've domesticated plants, and all of that science was informed to me by my parents and my family. And some of this, one of the big concepts is interconnectedness, and I still take that. That is a core of my research program today, that we are all connected to each other. We're connected to the environment. We're connected even to the rocks in our environment, and we're connected to all of the people who were our ancestors. And that's exactly what I see in genetic data today. So we can look at our genetic DNA and we know just one person, we know half of that is from your mother, half of that is from your father. So I got really interested in genetics in particular because of the stories it could tell us of our past, of how we have changed over time, how we have moved across the globe. And in particular, I became interested in pharmacogenetics because of the precision medicine initiative that was announced by former President Barack Obama. And that really inspired me because I wanted to be at the forefront of this research, doing precision health research with my community and personalizing medicine. There are so many health disparities in indigenous communities worldwide. So that was really my motivation. And pharmacogenomics is really the foundation of personalized medicine and personalized health. So the work that I do to study how people metabolize and process different medications and drugs has a wide range of applications, from cancer research to heart studies to one of the studies I'm working on with tribes is looking at how we can use personalized medicine to personalize treatment on smoking cessation. So I'm really dedicated to working with tribal communities, and in the future, I'm really looking forward to deepening these partnerships with communities and working with other American Indian, Alaska Native, and Indigenous communities in the U.S. and throughout the world. Right now, I work primarily with 16 tribes across the United States and in British Columbia. And I'm really interested in just broadening that scope to work with anyone who wants to work with me and to really help address health disparities in different communities. There's a lot of in talking with a lot of the community advisory boards that I work with, a lot of interest in different things, addiction, cancer. So I'm really excited to continue that work and bring a community-based approach and ethical approach to the research that I do, and to help others who want to use a similar method to do that with the communities that they work with.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. I know we'll want to talk more about all of what we're hearing so far. Rebecca, I'll turn to you next.
Thank you. I first want to just say how honored I am to be here. I said last night that I was overwhelmed by the caliber of the room, and I am still overwhelmed. You are all so impressive, and I am so just humbled and grateful to be sitting in this room with you. So the first prompt is, how I got interested in STEM and engineering. I've always loved math, and I've always loved building things, and I love uncovering how things work. Feels like unraveling a mystery. And so engineering, and I think specifically engineering research, felt like a very natural path for me and a natural progression. So my research is on adaptive robots. I study robots that can adapt in their morphology and behavioral control policy towards changing tasks or environments. And what that really boils down to is studying form and function. If we take locomotion as a case study, their animals in the water typically have flippers or fins and are very efficient locomotors in that environment. Animals on land often have legs like we do and are efficient locomotors on our land environment. And they don't often behave efficiently in the environment outside of what they are, their prominent, dominant environment. And so this is an opportunity where we can use technology to actually surpass what animals can potentially do. So if we can build animals that can totally change in their shape their form, shape-shifting robots that can adapt towards legs or flippers or fins, towards different environments and behave efficiently in all of those different environments. We can potentially achieve very efficient multi-environment locomotion. That's just locomotion as a case study. So I'm really excited about the potential for shape-shifting robots and looking at form and function, morphology, and behavioral control policy towards different tasks as well, not just locomotion. And really looking at the energetics and optimizing energetics for that purpose. So what am I excited about moving forward? Well, I love adaptive robots. That's what I've been thinking about. And animals as an inspiration are incredibly adaptive, especially over long time scales. We look at evolution, and that's how things moved from, that's the terrestrialization of animals, how things moved from the water to the land. And so looking at the use of living materials in adaptive robots is something I'm very excited about, trying to harness the phenotypic plasticity of living materials for increased adaptations in robots. So these living synthetic hybrids, I think, is a really exciting path that I'm interested in pursuing in the future. I'm also interested in using synthetic evolution in robots to study natural evolution and how environmental pressures have led to certain adaptations and how we can use that understanding to potentially design evolutions and adaptations, shape adaptations for more efficient behaviors in robots in the future. And I'm excited to just generally get robots out of the lab and into the wild. I'm excited for the applications that we don't even know about yet, the unknown unknowns. I think if we, discard the idea of a traditional robot and completely build our conception of robots from the ground up, what can robots be? What can robots do? There are applications that we haven't even thought of yet, and I'm so excited to discover those in the future.
Thank you, Rebecca. And let's turn next to Sheri and Eric.
Okay. So I got started into STEM at a very early age. I'm pretty sure it's when my parents gave me a roll of duct tape, a cardboard box, and a butter knife. That's all you need. You're absolutely right. And that set my destiny for engineering in stone. From that point in time, I got my professional engineering license in a couple of different fields across a couple of states, and I'm a licensed architect as well. So fast forward a little bit into getting into academia, and some years later, this 3D printer comes along, and it's a device that is now affordable. And it's technology that we've been seeing and heard about, but never gotten used. And in my opinion, this is a piece of technology that might as well be akin to a gateway drug when it comes to a STEM brain, because everyone gets hooked on it. The challenge was, how do we get this technology in front of every student in Kentucky in a way that creates a mindset of innovation? And it's move the students from, hey, cool, you've got a 3D printer, to this machine's awesome, and with my imagination, I can change the world with it, going in that way. And that, of course, led to our very first ATE-funded project, our influencer model, and being able to be part of this conversation here today. But how do we use it to address the incoming need of the semiconductor fabrication process? How do we use what we've done with that process to address the need in labor of construction and manufacturing industries? It had a lot of problems that we could solve with this process. And so for one thing, we came with solutions to that too. We realized that the community college are truly a nexus point that has the power to directly affect K through 12 educators, students, and even the economic profile of a region. It's one place regionally that you can actually influence the future engineers, the future researchers, and the future technicians in vast numbers before they even finish high school. But the catch is, the community colleges are not generally utilized in that fashion. To be fair, they were never set up that way. The resources tend to be limited, the faculty are often overloaded, and trying something new and different is not always available. They just don't have the deep pockets that typically universities do. So that's what we see as the critical next step for us, and truly our greatest challenge, is to develop a replicable strategy that, in one hand, scales what we've done, 3D printing, taking it to more states, using this program, and using the community college that is participating in the process to then become a nexus and influencer for other STEM goals. meaning that we use our 3D printing program to get community colleges in the door and help build up the champion in that school. And then we can transition that influence toward the areas of STEM that we see that are critical, critical for the region, critical for the state, and of course, critical for the nation. So that's kind of where we see the next step and what we've been working on all this time.
So my story in STEM began with my parents. My dad was a U.S. Army veteran during the Vietnam era. And then when he got out of the Army, he joined a construction business. So he's working in asphalt construction. He would bring home problems to me to solve. I was a little kid. He would bring these home to me and say, Sheri, see if you can solve this faster than I did. Now, I took him up on that challenge and just really started enjoying learning about problem solving and math and how I could use that to answer questions that were above and beyond just what was in front of me. Then my mom was my first grade teacher. My mom was a first generation college student. Her parents had a sixth grade education. And so education was very important in our household, and that was always encouraged. In fact, my dad, when I was working on my dissertation, my dad was battling cancer, and I was sitting in the hospital room with him, and he was just cheering me on the whole way because he wanted me to finish that dissertation. So that was my inspiration in STEM, was with my family at home. So that's where I learned to love it. And then as I became an educator, I taught high school math and computer science for 22 years. And so as part of that process, I was very blessed to be able to start with computer science, which I'd fallen in love with along the way, be able to start my career with that. And as one of the first computer science educators, and particularly female computer science educators in Kentucky. And so that led to just a joy of working with high school students and transitioning them on to whatever their next level was. And that became my inspiration, just seeing my colleagues and learning through professional development, seeing the students that would come in with different things to show me because they wanted to show off what they were learning. And then along that pathway, I became a part of Advanced Kentucky's College Readiness Program as a teacher. And so through that program, we were provided professional development as well as funding for AP computer science courses. And with part of that funding, I was able to purchase my first Frankenstein 3D printer. Literally, we had to piece it together, little piece by little piece, which was so much fun. But I got to do that along with my students. I was learning as much from them as they were from me. But from that, I realized that this is a tool that it's taking them not necessarily with what they're doing in the classroom, but outside the classroom. They were taking it home and showing their parents what they were doing. They were building things and designing them in CAD, in which they taught themselves. Learning these things in CAD, designing them themselves, and actually building and taking them out into the community and showing them off, showing them to other classrooms and working on other projects, crossing the curriculum. So I thought this is a transformational tool. When I became STEM coordinator at Advanced Kentucky in 2019, I started supporting K-12 STEM education across the state of Kentucky. And as part of that, I was program manager for Maker Minded, which combines STEM activities and advanced manufacturing activities as a competition. One of the teachers that was doing very well in that program said, all right, you need to meet this Eric Wooldridge guy, because you two are in the same line of thinking. That happened in 2019. We got funding to start our computer science initiatives at Advanced Kentucky in 2020, and that just started the ball rolling. And the pandemic actually helped us to be able to do that because we could roll out online professional development curriculum to high school, and not only high school, but K-12 educators across the state. And it just opened a door that has not stopped rolling yet. So where we plan to go next with this, Eric mentioned a number of different a number of different ways that we plan to move forward. But we also need to look at the academic indicators of what's happening here. This has happened so quickly. We've gotten so many numbers of teachers and students in dual credit classes and professional development. We need to look at those academic indicators. What's happening in their brains to cause these changes? What's happening to cause the cultural mindset changes that we see in stories that we haven't had enough time yet to be able to flesh out? What are the economic impacts in our state? How is this influencer model affecting not only our classrooms, but also our small businesses? How is it affecting the degree and the characteristics of the workers that are going into not only our factories, but also into our engineering fields? They're also going into the higher education world as well. So we need to look at those indicators and determining basically what are the cruxes that are causing these changes. So that's where we're headed next, and we thank you so much.
Thank you. Your vision is really fascinating. And Paul, I'll turn to you next.
Well, first, thank you for the invitation and the award. Greatly appreciated, and amazing to go behind these great innovators. Just amazing to watch and listen. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So I had gone through being a professor, chair, and I had a few companies come by and a few opportunities, and realized for some of our work, and realized that when I took those, I took one where I left academics, left tenure and all this, and went into a startup, which eventually became, I think, one of the first stem cell publicly traded companies. But when I went there, it was interesting because I knew nothing about patenting and licensing and these kinds of things. I'd gone through academics without, I felt innovative, publishing a lot of methods papers, but not really knowing kind of what to do with it. And then eventually I wanted to go back to my home state of Florida, and went to University of South Florida. And because of my experience, even for a few years, started a few companies and did this, and other faculty just, well, you just want to be rich or something. You're not really an academic. And so then the Great Recession hit, and we got hit as universities with kind of the government saying, and all the universities coming together, help with economic development in your area. And so the university asked me to lead research at the university level. And I thought, well, how are we going to do this at economic development aspects? Because everyone's in the publish or perish and getting grants and doing this. And so I put out there, and the first thing that a lot of universities were hitting, especially in the research offices, was tech transfer, because that's usually the first one that gets hit when there's a budget crisis. So I thought, well, so I sent out a letter, and I said, and this is at University of South Florida, which it's AAU now, which is great, but it wasn't that level that long ago. And said, if you want to have a lunch with me and you have a US patent, come and have lunch. And I didn't know who was going to come. And I had 100 people. There were 100 faculty that had US patents that came to lunch at this university. And I'm thinking, you know what? We are all closet inventors, and we need to come out of that closet. And we need to make invention, we need to make commercialization, we need to make all this entrepreneurship part of the academic mission. And everyone told a story about how they do this on the side. If you look at the older inventors, I can look at inventors that I know here, and they probably have a similar story. And it wasn't part of their academic, wasn't part of their promotion. So we focused, so we eventually went to, a group of us as VPRs went to the US Patent Office and met with the Undersecretary and Director. And he said, Obama's asked us, all the agencies, to look at how we can help the economy of our local areas. And he said, we know mostly what big companies do. We know what garage inventors and independent inventors do, because they have lots of associations, but we don't know what the academic world does. So he said, why don't we, so a group of us said, and I kind of said, let's do an academy and let's get that going. So they came down, the undersecretary came down, we did it at USF and we inaugurated the academy. The next year we felt strongly, who are the individuals that are best in their field and went out of their way to also invent. And those became our first fellows. And I can see some fellows in this room, for example. Not only did they're great at academics, but they were also great in invention. And these could be great role models to help move this thing down. And so that started, and we ended up now 14 years later with an incredible group of people. We have almost 1,900 fellows that are all mostly academics that are peak of their field and inventors and have done something, not with their invention. And we have 300 universities that have joined on already. And it was hard to get some of those universities. Oh, well, what makes you think you can, help us out and all this? So it's been growing. It's been a great opportunity. I can tell you that Ponch was a vice president of the organization for a number of years. Thank you, Ponch. And so I would argue that I think what we're going to be doing in the future and what I like about the future, and I love hearing about your work and stuff, is it's about students, giving them the tools. I didn't have the tools. I know most of the older folks in here didn't have the tools. Giving them the tools about whether they patent or not. Know what a patent is, know what it's about, know what intellectual property is, know the opportunities for, you can start a company. Most universities in here, and I know Purdue started that a long time ago, was having student incubators and business incubators. And now it's all mostly all over universities. There was one, when we started this, there was one university that had it in their bylaws that patents and licensing was part of promotion and tenure. And that was, I think, Texas A&M. Now most universities have it. We've gone through that and it's a big part of it. So this is our mission. And we will be offering it. We're going to be announcing at our annual meeting next month in Raleigh-Durham area. It's going to be next month. The first, what we think is like the Nobel Prize for student inventors. They have to have won invention prizes somewhere else in the United States. And we're going to give them money and an opportunity to really make that and shine it. People like to be honored. And unless something's measured and honored and stuff, they're not going to do it. And so that's key to me and key to the faculty and the members of our board and everything. How do we honor everyone, get them into this and give them the tools in which if they see something, they go, you know what, maybe I should take this to the tech transfer office and see if it's a viable, see if we can be licensed, see if we can start a startup.
Well, in the spirit of like how important it is to honor everyone, I hope that we can take a few minutes because I know my fellow board members would really love to ask all of you some questions. Thank you for that challenge of trying to say what all the things that are passionately driving you in 3 minutes. So I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and kick things off with the first question to you, Katrina. I was very taken with your eloquent description of the knowledge that your ancestors have and how much that has driven and coordinated with other things that you strategically chose as a path. And I have a kind of broad question that I'm curious about your thinking is when you think about your commitment to broadening both the recognition of and expansion and building together with Indigenous science and to encourage more researchers who come from tribal communities, what would you say would be some of the steps that would encourage more people to follow pathways, not just exactly like yours, but doing some of what you have as your goal that wouldn't make you an exception or exceptional, but you are, but also have it become something much more common that could happen. What are some of your thoughts about that?
Yes, great question. Thank you. And I wanted to add to what my answer before. I want to bring robots and 3D printing into my research program. But but I've just been so inspired by this panel. So to answer your question, I think that I am definitely a product of the academic pipeline, and I took advantage of every single program out there. As a high school student, as an undergraduate, I was always at a summer research program. for science STEM exposure. I was also a MARC scholar, so the Minority Access to Research Careers, which really made it okay for me to be in a lab space and work with really amazing mentors. And then even now, I am a Gold scholar as a faculty. So it's been really great to be a part of all of these programs. And actually, my position at University of Colorado was influenced by a Native American faculty who was my mentor in ACE's Lighting the Pathway program. So I've taken advantage of so many mentors and different programs out there. I think that to really make this more a part of Navajo and other Indigenous students' life is to really just bring the science to them, bring it to the communities, and also make the science not so hard to understand, or we can distill the knowledge to something that is culturally appropriate to them. When something is familiar, you're more likely to get inspired and understand it than something that's completely unfamiliar. So that's also a part of my goals in the future, to really make science, genetics, pharmacogenomics very accessible to the community. And even now, I work with a lot of elders in my community, and one big way that we are trying to make it accessible is actually to translate genetics terms into the Navajo language. We have a genetics glossary where we've translated 250 terms into the Navajo language. And with 40% of our population's first language being Navajo, this is a huge barrier that's being lifted. Now we can say DNA, which is Inabitlol in the Navajo language, and I can explain that to my aunties and my elders. So I think that's one thing that I'm really excited about in the future.
It's very interesting. Thank you so much I'm sure there's lots more to say. I'm going to turn now to my board colleagues and open it up to see what questions you might have for our really fascinating panelists here.
There's hands up in Zoom.
Okay. Shall I go first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you to all of you. And for Katrina, I did my PhD at the University of Colorado. Go Buffs. But my question's for John. John, I'm a spaceflight guy, and spaceflight is very hard. And part of the reason that it's so hard is that we have such primitive propulsion technology. So it's very hard to move big things, and it's very hard to move around the solar system. So I was very interested in what you had to say about the development of AI coinciding with the roadblocks to continued development along Moore's law. So how do you see a way out of that? Is there a way out of that in which somehow the AI can be done either much more efficiently or maybe through algorithm development instead of hardware development? What's the future?
So that's a very good question. I think two things will happen. One is we're going to need new clever ideas in architecture. We've already got some. I mean, GPUs use a very different structure, for example, than conventional CPUs, and they're much more efficient. We're going to have to continue to invent new hurdles like that. There is no next generation Moore's law, unfortunately. I wish there was. That's why I'm retiring. It's So we're going to have to find a way around that. The other thing that will happen is smaller models for smaller purposes. So you don't need, if you want to build the AlphaFold equivalent, you don't need to train something like GPT. So we'll see models which are still computationally intensive, but smaller get developed. The other problem we're going to have is, and this is a challenge I think the NSB should think about, how is academia going to continue to play a role in next generation AI when the amount of computational resources outstrip? One company has more computational resources than the entire US Academy. So that's a real gap and is going to inhibit innovation as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vicki.
Thank you. Very inspirational. Just congratulations to all of you. My question is for Eric. I was struck by your point, which I resonated with, that community colleges are a nexus point with K-12 high school teachers and students, but they weren't set up to do that super well. So I would love to hear from you and maybe Sheri as well. What are, let's just say, two top of mind things in your opinion that would help community colleges be better at strengthening that nexus?
That's a very good question. And it is a social problem, a cultural problem. Make a little bit more. It's on. It's on. Got the red light. I can lean in. How about that? There we go. So it is a challenging problem, and it's primarily because, you know, when you're so focused on what your primary job is, it's extremely difficult to be able to say, okay, now I need to focus on something else while maintaining my primary work. And so the first step is to allocate support and training for faculty members at community colleges that want to become that influencer of the region, because they're going to need to understand the economics of the region. They're going to need to understand their work and how it's going to support, you know, K-12 schools. So when you're just teaching the same thing all the time and worried about that, there's going to be a little training, there's going to be a little time, and there's going to need to be a little bit of, free time to start doing that. But as far as the process, it's not really that difficult. You know, we've done it enough times, we know how to do it, but the support needs to be there. And of course, it has to come down from administration as well.
So things like course releases for this kind of work.
Absolutely. And honestly, just, you know, a little bit of a culture training, because you're going to need to understand the industry around you too, and the small businesses. And that's oftentimes not what we see in academia. You have to have that full high level vision to go with it.
Thank you. Suresh. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I have a question for Eric and Sheri. When you're deploying this across the Kentucky, how did you build the trust, and then how can we repeat that to everywhere in our country?
I think a lot of the trust factor came from the fact that, first of all, Eric and I had to build the vision for it. And then once we built the vision for it, it was, I'll just come down to it as I knew a lot of teachers just because of the work that I had done through Advanced Kentucky and through my professional 20 years in education. And just going face to face sometimes to them and saying, here, we have this opportunity for you. They were already interested in computer science, but didn't know necessarily how 3D printing and additive manufacturing could fit into that role. Some of them were interested in math. Some of them were interested in other things. They didn't realize the cross-cultural nature that came with 3D printing. And so it was really building that trust factor through one-to-one developing of relationships and having conversations, meaningful conversations with folks, and giving them the impression that you can do this.
And it's not only that you can do this, but we're going to be there to help you along the way. And so that was one of the things that we learned early on from our first project that we didn't do well. We got it started, but then we didn't have support after that. So the continual hand-holding is what builds the trust, because they learn to rely on you. And rightly so, because that's our job. Our job is to make it easy for them to take this technology that we see the economy needing and deliver it. And so being there day in and day out to deal with all of the issues they have with the software, with their IT blocks, all the things that are going to be a problem, to say, we're going to help you all the way through, and it's going to be a relationship for years. So that's perfect for us too, because then technology is going to change, and we're going to say, all right, now we've done this together, now let's do this together.
Roger?
Thanks, and thanks to the panel. It was really interesting and inspiring for sure. Paul, I'd like to ask, I mean, I was struck by the advances that have been made in the academy that you initiated. I grew up in the time when the patents that I was involved in were sort of scary to other faculty members in my department, and it was actually raised in the Senate of whether or not this really belonged in the university. So I'm struck by the changes which have come about, but there are a lot of faculty that while they will file a patent, won't pursue the next step. What are the challenges you think can be overcome, and what will lead to that change, which truly makes filing a patent or starting a company or creating investment opportunities in the university that really result in greater innovation that come out of our universities? I take the point that was made earlier by Jem, is that right? A lack of computer power. I mean, that's not the only thing we're missing in universities, but that's certainly a great component of academic scarcity. So where do you think we can get more innovation out of our faculty so that we truly do serve society?
Great question. And it's one the Academy tackles is, I think what you're seeing is more technology transfer is happening.
Better transfer?
Better
is more.
Well, the question is, the real question is probably, I would say 90%, honestly, 90% tech transfer offices probably don't make the amount of money in royalties that it probably costs. And you got to remember, half the money in most universities, average about half, goes back to the inventor, right? So they really have to kind of do double. But there's so many other benefits I can tell you just personally, when people come in looking for a job, a lot of them, oh, let me talk to your tech transfer. I like doing patents too. Not only do I publish a bunch of papers and have grants, I want to do patents. I want to have students that are going to be along here. It provides a lot of other benefits as well. I think one of the issues, and I'm going to be honest here, is the cost of patents. And yet we will put a lot of money into paying for publications in journals that might cost $5,000 to get published in a top journal now with APC fees and stuff. But we don't provide, I think maybe R41, R43 grants may have some money for patents, but we don't provide that. So patents now actually could be cost less than publications. When I was I used to work with Taiwan a lot. I'd go over there every year to evaluate some of the NIH grants and stuff. And I gave a speech. And it was, they asked me to, and it was the first time that when I presented this, I said, you know what, I have patents on this, and I have a Taiwanese patent. And a few people came up and said, oh my God, that's better than a science paper. So other countries value this better than we value this in the United States. But and the U.S. has a really nice bonus in some sense. You can put in a provisional patent and have a year, and the provisional patents don't cost much, but it gives the faculty the feeling that they're really translating things, allows them to be involved. I think they should do more of it, be involved in licensing it to companies they know about, whether they want to do a startup, whether they want their postdoc or their graduate students to kind of do it. I think it's a whole vibrant area to do, and we should be involved in that. And I think honestly, again, we should have that as part of our grants, is if they want to do a patent. The Bayh-Dole Act allowed universities to do this, but we've never really given the opportunity to provide some of the money toward patenting and as well. So those would be some of my comments.
I think this will probably have to be our last question. Merlin?
Roger, thank you so much for bringing up that question, because it's really important to me as a researcher in scale research. Again, there's a lot of great inventions that's done on the academia scale, but then what's next, right? Because we're definitely looking for economic impact as a result of these intellectual properties. So I have a question for Dr. Bell, as well as for Eric and Sheri, as well as Rebecca. A question for you is, have you thought about what's the next step? Who would you like to transfer this technology to for commercialization? And for Sheri and Eric, I would like to hear more about the impact of your initiative so far.
Thank you for the question. I have definitely thought about the next step in terms of getting the technology to the patients that will benefit most from it. And so the signal processing technique that I mentioned is patented. And I am currently in discussions with at least 2 companies who could use it in their own product line. And in parallel, I am considering options for some sort of company formation or spin-off out of my own lab, which, you know, hopefully the Waterman funds will enable more in that direction. I have also hired dedicated personnel to solely focus on the commercialization arm of my lab. And I'm looking to grow in that direction in terms of, you know, these are students who get training, master's degree in bioengineering, innovation, and design. Their primary interest is founding companies. I have the technology that has a wealth of companies to be founded. And so I think, you know, this merger will be a perfect combination to help with getting the technology to the patients that can benefit from it.
And actually on that note, so we just filed the very first patent ever done by our community and technical college system. And now we have some provisionals too. So I say that just to say that's our goal as well. We want to get the community colleges into that process because there's a lot of innovation waiting to happen in a lot of places that have never had that opportunity before. Funding is going to be a big issue with that, but we want that to happen. That's where it's going to be.
And
Sheri?
from a numbers impact, I just compiled some numbers last week, and I'm still working on some updated, but as far as from the K-12 and K-14 education space, as of the spring of 2024, we have trained 201 K through 14 educators. So elementary all the way through dual credit teachers, and those are at multiple levels. And we don't have the new numbers yet, but there are over 5,000 students that have been introduced to 3D printing concepts since we started the program in 2020. And this is the very first year of the additive manufacturing CTE pathway, the very first one in the country that's been endorsed by a state or a Kentucky Department of Education. So we'll have our first students in that program. And just individual schools, we have a Western Kentucky rural school in which they have over 300 students requesting 3D printing, robotics, and computer science courses next year. This is in a school that did not even have a computer science pathway 3 years ago. So that just gives you an idea and a snapshot of the impact that the program is having thus far.
Rebecca, did you want to add something to that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'll echo a bit of what was said. Technology transfer can be really challenging, and my lab is really fortunate to have a lot of support from Yale in terms of patenting and commercializing our technologies. But I also want to mention how important STTR grants have been to our group. My group has received 4 unique STTR awards and allowed us to partner with companies and focus solely on technology transfer. And that has been a really, really amazing opportunity for us, allowing us to really partner closely with companies and giving them the funds as well to partner closely with us and focus on infusing our technologies into startup companies.
Just add one thing to this point. There are enough grants now in the TIP Directorate to translate technologies, including paying patent costs. So I want you all to check out the TIP Directorate and make sure. And I'm very happy that you are all part of the Regional Innovation Engine Type 1 program from Tennessee. So very, very thrilled with that. Thank you.
With that, I think we'll have to end. It could obviously go on for a long time. You each are doing such interesting things. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and please join me in thanking our panelists.